All right. Hello and welcome to the Conquering the IT Cover Letter webinar presented by Heather and Alan Ackmann. I'm Chris Colucci from TrainSignal, and I'd like to take a minute to tell you what to expect in the next hour. I'd like to draw your attention to the questions box in your webinar control panel. Heather and Alan will be answering questions today, so please feel free to submit your questions during the presentation. Also, if you have any technical difficulties, let us know in the questions box, and we'll do our best to assist you. Today's presentation will be recorded and available to view on our blog. We'll email you the link after the presentation. After you exit the webinar, you will be prompted to take a short survey. TrainSignal wants to hear from you, so please take a few minutes to complete the survey. Also, we will be choosing one participant from today's audience to receive a copy of TrainSignal's Microsoft Word 2010 training. To be eligible to win, you must complete the survey that you will receive after the webinar. Be sure to fill it out. It only takes a few seconds. Also, if you have any additional comments or feedback, you can email us at webinars@trainsignal.com. And with that, thank you for joining us for today's webinar. Now here's Heather and Alan.
Hi, good afternoon, morning, whatever it is for you folks. I'm Heather Ackmann.
My name is Alan Ackmann.
And this is Conquering the IT Cover Letter.
Over the next hour or so, we're going to be covering a lot of the basics of how to write an IT cover letter, but the first thing to get out of the way initially is that career advice is regional. We're not sure exactly the demographics of who all is in the audience, but different cultures and countries have kind of different standards occasionally about how the etiquette of job hunting goes. So all of the advice in this area, or this webinar, is going to be geared towards someone looking for work in the United States.
That's right. You don't have to live in the U.S., just have to be looking for work in the U.S.
And similarly, this is also, as the title would suggest, going to be advice that's primarily geared for somebody in the IT field. If you've stumbled upon this webinar through other channels, however, than just directly registering it, there's still a lot of good advice here, but we are going to be pulling from a lot of information technology examples. But in the interest of getting to know you guys a little bit more, we're going to start off with a couple of polls here. First, we're going to ask you guys questions. That'll be up there in just a moment.
Yeah, we'd like to know which best describes your current situation. Are you a recent or soon-to-be college graduate? Are you a career changer looking to break into the IT field? Have you recently been laid off? If so, I'm very sorry. Or are you currently employed but interested or looking for something maybe a little bit better, maybe a little bit more money? Or are you just here to see what's here? Other. So go ahead, fill those out. Give you a few more seconds.
So we're up to 65% voting. Numbers climbing. All right. And I think that's enough.
All right, let me close and share those for you. And that's what we have. We have 48% of you currently employed but looking for something better. That's a good percentage there. We have 13% recently laid off, so sorry. 10% who are career changers, and 5% who are recent or soon-to-be college graduates. And then the rest of you are in that other category. So welcome all. We do have one more poll that I would like to show you. And that is, which version of Microsoft Word do you use most often? Go ahead, take a few moments, fill that out.
And we're up to 84% voted.
So we're going to close this very soon. And it looks like that's awesome. The majority of you are using Word 2010. It's funny, every few months when we do one of these webinars featuring something from Word 2010, that percentage keeps climbing. Yay. Then we have 42% of you using Word 2007. No one voted for Word 2003 or an older version of Word. And 2% does not use Microsoft Word at all. Fascinating.
Well, that's reassuring statistics to see, actually, because that skews pretty well with the kind of things we're going to be emphasizing in this webinar. So let's move on to our first topic, now that we know a little bit more about who you guys are. We're going to begin by talking a little bit about cover letter layout. Now, what we mean by this is we're not going to get into the content just yet, but we want to talk about the organization of a cover letter and kind of the formatting features that need to be present. We'll just cover a few quick tips about that very, very briefly.
And to start the topic off, we're going to give you kind of a high-level overview of the general layout of, cover letters. So bear with us. Examples will come later, we promise. But here is what a standard letter would look like on paper.
It's pretty similar to what you would see in a conventional business letter. And since I think 56% or so of you were already employed but looking for something better, you're probably familiar with the conventions. It's going to start off with a letterhead up at the top, just like you would when you were sending out a letter or a business letter for your company. Now, if you're looking for a nice, well-formatted letterhead, the easiest thing to do is to actually just take the letterhead that you've got on your resume itself. Whatever formatting decisions you've made, that looks nice and fits with your personality, take it, copy it, paste it directly into the letterhead here, and it gives a nice sense of unity between all of your different documents.
Now, the rules will get a little bit different depending on how you are submitting your application materials. If you're submitting it through via an online form, or if you've been asked specifically to submit your materials, through email, you could, forego that letterhead.
And yeah, that past advice assumes that you're submitting it in a printed format of some kind, whether as an email attachment or you're at a career conference or something like that. But other sections of a resume or cover letter that are worth talking about. Below that, the letterhead and the date, you put your recipient address. You usually want to be fairly comprehensive with the addresses. List somebody's actual name, full contact information, just so that can get routed through the appropriate channels if need be. Next comes what's known as the salutation, and a salutation is just basically a greeting for any kind of letter. You'll notice for a quick punctuation issue, it's got the colon at the end there instead of a comma, and that is conventional business format. And usually with cover letters, you want to err on the side of being too formal, so I would recommend using that. As for how you want to address people in a salutation, again, usually more formal is better than not formal enough. I usually recommend going with full name, Dear John Smith, and then potentially the Director of Human Resources or whatever their name might be. So you would say, Dear John Smith, comma, Director of Human Resources. If you don't know who you're addressing, you're just applying, then a good move is usually just to put the probable position title of whoever is going to be reading it, hiring manager, whatever reasonable assumptions you can make.
Now, your body paragraphs, typically you'll have three. You'll have one short paragraph introducing what exactly you're doing in writing this letter, which is, you're applying for some kind of job. So that's stated quickly in that, and we'll elaborate on that a little bit later. Then you will usually have some sort of body paragraph. This can be one paragraph or a couple paragraphs. It doesn't necessarily have to be one, but this contains the meat of the information that you are trying to convey. And then finally, you have a closing paragraph, which is usually nitty-gritty details about how you can be contacted, what times you're available, etc.
And as for the closing line, there's no need to get too complicated with this. Sincerely is appropriate, especially if you're just making first impressions. You don't want to jump directly to thanks or best or see you soon or any other more conversational way of ending. The sincerely is fine. You have, just like you end a regular business letter with your signature and a typed name. And then you want to list any enclosures that you might be including along with the resume, or with the cover letter. And that can be a resume, a link to a portfolio, letters of recommendation, any other things that usually go into the job search packet. Now, I would also mention if you're submitting it electronically, it's usually a good idea in the cover letter to mention whatever you've uploaded elsewhere. at this moment, like if you've uploaded these things into a database of some kind. Because just like with enclosures, if something's gone missing, you want the people who get the letter to know about that fact. And that pretty much covers the basics of structure of a cover letter. Conceptually, it's, again, very similar to regular business communication, where the opening paragraph establishes the purpose, the middle paragraph elaborates on your content, and then the paragraph below that, the final paragraph, covers all of the basic information, or covers all of the logistics for contact and next steps. Now, you'll notice as well, this is one page, and there's a very important reason for that. Cover letters should almost never be more than one page. Now, it's not a book. It's not a biography.
A history of you.
Yeah, this isn't an encyclopedia of everything you've ever done. It's going to be not quite as developed as a resume, but it has advantages of being a little bit formal and a little bit more familiar and personalized at the same time. So before we get into the idea of building a resume or a cover letter from scratch, which is what we usually recommend, there are a couple of advantages and shortcuts that people sometimes take. And Heather is going to be talking about those real quick and the advantages and shortcomings.
So with Microsoft Word templates, as Alan suggested, there are many that you can choose from. Some of them are very good, some of them not so good. It's kind of a mixed bag, these templates. So I'm going to go through and kind of talk about the differences between what you will actually see within the Microsoft Word 2007 and 2010 interface. Now, the screenshots I have here are for Word 2010, but it is very, very similar to what you will find in Word 2007 as well. So when you go to your File menu in Microsoft Word and click on New, you'll have a couple of different areas from which you can create a brand new document in Microsoft Word. Now, what we're focusing in on is the area that specifically states office.com templates. Now, it might look a little bit different for 2007, but it's still there. Now, you want to find an icon that looks like this and says letters. That is where you'll find all the different kinds of letter templates that are supplied through office.com. When you click on that letters icon, you will be brought to another subfolder with a lot of different types of letters broken down, and cover letters should be the fourth folder in. And when you click on that, you'll see a wide variety of cover letters with which to choose. Some of these are geared towards specific kinds of jobs, like a sales representative or a sales manager or part-time nursing. Others are geared to even more specific, more narrowly focused jobs like network administrator. And some of them are a little bit, more generalized, like just IT cover letter. Now, another thing you want to pay close attention to is where the template is coming from. In the upper right-hand corner of the screen, once you select a specific template to view, you'll have information about who's providing that template. Such examples can be Microsoft themselves. That's someone within Microsoft has created this template for download. And they also have partnerships with companies like McGraw-Hill, where you can view samples from books that McGraw-Hill has published or something that their authors have provided, etc. The one that I'm showing you here on the screenshot is for the Network Administrator cover letter, and that is supplied by McGraw-Hill, and it's, again, from the book 201 Killer Cover Letters. All right. You also might notice an icon that looks a lot like this little guy. He's this orange, like, stick figure dude in the lower right-hand corner of that thumbnail. And what he means is that this is a Microsoft Community Submitted Template. Now, this is a program that Microsoft has closed. I think they stopped accepting new templates back when was that, October of last year?
Something like that, late last year.
They are still available for download as of this recording. That could change very quickly, though. So we have no date, we have no other information other than that, other than they're not accepting new templates. But the old templates are available, so grab those now. If there's one that you use constantly and never have downloaded it to your computer, well, of course you have to download it. But anyway, grab it now, or if you've uploaded some, there they are. And these are templates submitted by anyone. Your neighbor down the street Could have submitted one.
And
You
with
could
that
have
in
submitted
mind,
here.
when you're looking at these templates and evaluating them, you really do have to be conscious and deliberate about what you're choosing to employ. Some of these are going to be fairly high quality and very appropriate. Some of them are going to be a little bit more generic. You're going to get somebody who presents a template mostly for self-promotional reasons to draw traffic into their own product. So you want to make sure that you're going to be looking at one that's going to be suitable to your needs. And occasionally they're not going to let you take full advantage of everything that's available to you. Consider an example for one of these templates.
So this is, again, that one we're looking at from McGraw-Hill. I have nothing against McGraw-Hill. Love the publisher. Great people. But I hate this cover letter. It's just sort of listing the requirements for the job. Like, it could be verbatim directly from the ad, and then it's a simple checklist of whether or not the applicant has those desired things. It's not that this is terrible, it won't get the person the job, it's just that there's a lot of real estate space being wasted here that could really be kind of elaborating on who exactly is applying for this job.
Yeah, when I look at this cover letter, I see something that is a baseline competent, but also represents a lot of missed opportunities to amplify strengths about the candidate that are just not being taken advantage of.
That's a good way to phrase it, hon.
So what we'd like to do now, if you want to use these templates, that's fine, but use discernment in which ones you select and how you personalize them. But if you want to build a cover letter from scratch, there is a little bit of a framework that you can use. And we'd like to go through that right now so you can achieve the basic functionality of a cover letter while also having your own strengths to it. So the first thing we want to talk about is what needs to go in the introductory paragraph of a cover letter. Like we mentioned, the introductory paragraph is going to be very, very short, and usually no more than a few sentences. That's going to include the following. First would be the job that you're applying for. Now, that you can get out of the way just in the first sentence. I am writing to you to apply for the blank job. Now, that serves a couple of purposes. It announces the main objective of the letter right off the bat, which is the main purpose. Now, the next thing that you should add is how you found the job. Now, in addition to being polite and helping the reader ground themselves in your experience, there's also a couple of additional advantages to this. If from the company's point of view, they spend a lot of time and money trying to track which ways of attracting candidates have good return on investments and which ones don't. So you need to be able to establish where you encountered the company, any previous familiarity, so they can have a good tab on how their recruitment efforts are panning out. And from your point of view as a candidate, the other thing that you can get out of it is it lets you remind them if you've got any kind of personal connection. If you've met somebody at a job fair, for example, or you saw a presentation, maybe somebody came and talked with you at a college or conference that you attended, any sort of familiarity that you've got with them can be a good way to demonstrate that in very, very quickly. And then finally, you want to end this paragraph with one or two sentences maybe about why you're a good fit. Just try to sum up your candidacy and why it's viable in one statement or two. And what that's going to do, in addition to establishing your purpose right away, is it's going to kind of set the framework for the rest of the letter. You can think about this, if you go all the way back to your college composition classes, as almost being like the thesis statement for the rest of the letter. It's the main claim or premise that your subsequent paragraphs are going to elaborate on, and it provides a nice sense of initial structure. So that's pretty much it for introductory paragraphs.
Short but sweet.
Short but sweet, as they should be. Now let's move on to what Heather referred to as the meat of the letter, and that would be the body paragraphs. Can be one, can be two. It kind of depends on exactly what you want to say and how much you have to say. But we'll go through some of the objectives that a body paragraph needs to accomplish before we get into specific examples.
So the first thing that you want to include with the body paragraphs is that you're picking and choosing what you want to highlight as the most relevant skills, qualities, experience from your work history, your personal life, whatever. Those belong in the body paragraphs. That's the first thing. Second, your body paragraph should also, kind of like another secondary goal, you want to establish your relationship with the company for which you are applying. you could be hired, and this is your first impression that you are giving your employer.
Think of it as setting the tone of how you would be as an employee. We're going to talk later on in this webinar about creating a workplace identity for yourself through webinar or through the cover letter, and this is your first opportunity to do that.
Yeah, and the second point is kind of neat because you don't really have much of that opportunity with the resume. But here you can throw in a lot of personality in regards with how you will be in that company.
Yeah, the conventions of a resume almost unavoidably have a listing and kind of distancing format, but you get opportunities for a cover letter like that. Now the last thing is that you want to show your familiarity with your target company. A cover letter is a great opportunity to demonstrate that you know who you're talking to.
You've done your homework.
Yeah, and you're not just kind of carpet bombing and applying for every single job that crosses your path. You've got some familiarity with who you're talking about. So to sum up the point, a resume or a cover letter should not just be a copy of your resume. You want to make sure that you are selective about what you include. Similarly, your cover letter should not just be a copy of the job ad itself. Sometimes people, when they write about a cover letter, they'll spend the time just parroting back terminology that they see in the cover letter. And the way they try to demonstrate I'm a perfect candidate for you is by just naming everything that they said that they were asking for. Which is a nice first step, but it seems, again, like kind of a missed opportunity. It's not one or the other, in other words. Ideally, your cover letter is going to demonstrate the link between you as a candidate and your hopeful dream job. Since most of you seem like you have jobs already, I can only assume you're going after that job that's going to be a perfect fit for you. So cover letters is, if you take nothing else away from this webinar, I really think that this little concept is the main thing to demonstrate. And as for some specific examples here, let's first take a look at a job ad. We're going to hit you with a lot of text, and there it is. This is a copy or a slightly condensed and modified version of one ad that we pulled off of a job search site just yesterday, frankly.
Nice career builder.
Yeah, it lists, the job here is basically a systems administrator, jack of all trades. They want someone to wear a lot of the IT hats, as you can tell just by glancing down at this. So the first thing you need to do with this job ad is to look through it and read it critically to identify what they're actually asking for. And there's a couple of ways that you can do that. The first is just to maybe imply or assume that they're ranking these in order of importance. Might not be that ordinarily can be a questionable assumption, but in this case it bears fruit. Because if you look at that first one, maintain Exchange email server, Exchange 2010, a must. It's the only
thing that's labeled here as a must for this job. So, down in the lower right-hand corner, you can see other job requirements, and they put VMware ESX above Exchange Server 2010, but the fact that they actually put that in parentheses, Exchange 2010 a must, that's probably ding, 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 the signal that should probably, if you have Exchange 2010 experience, yeah, you should talk about that in your cover letter.
And if you read through all of these points, we're not going to do anything as tedious as recite the entire thing right now, but you can look down at the other bullet points listing, and there's a lot of monitor and maintain.
Monitor and maintain. Monitor
and
maintain.
Monitor and maintain network, or maintain normal the network. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Monitor and maintain Active Directory and ensure control of accounts through group policy. So it all feels like kind of a conventional way that they're just sort of establishing their own requirements, but there are just a few things that flash out at you, quite literally, if you look at the slide. Well, the point where it talks about ensuring proper and complete backup and recovery of all servers and databases, that one breaks with the pattern, which to me implies that it gets a little bit more of a prominence than maybe some of the other requirements. The fact that we're proper, especially in that phrase, proper and complete, maybe makes it seem like they've had issues with having a reliable backup strategy in the past, maybe some data loss issues. So that might be another clue as far as something that you could highlight.
Yeah, if you have experience with it, talk about it.
Now, we're making a lot of assumptions here, but I think there's a foundation for these assumptions. And when you're looking at a job ad, If they took the time to go through and describe everything that they're looking for, a good first step to skewing your own cover letter is to try to address those concerns directly. Now, with that in mind, if you're establishing this link between you and the company, you don't want to do something as formulaic as just spitting back information. You don't want to repeat what they've said. Again, they know what they've said. So here's an example of a sentence that doesn't quite do that job. I'll just read it. In my current job, I maintain an Exchange 2010 server. I manage and maintain an Exchange 2010 server. So it's the terminology from the want ad. It mentions the requirements.
It's almost verbatim what the ad actually is asking for.
Yeah, and so...
That's okay. It doesn't really elaborate any more on that.
Yeah, there's pretty much anybody who's a competent candidate applying for this will be able to say this sentence. So what you want to do is demonstrate how your experience is particular. So let's take a look at a better one that does connect the experience with the job requirement.
So here we have, I'll read it this time, hon.
Go for it.
Recently, I migrated my company from a hosted Exchange server to an in-house Exchange 2010 server, providing greater control over data storage, archiving, and permissions, ensuring compliance with SEC regulations. Now, I wouldn't call this a perfect sentence, but it is a step in the right direction in giving the reader or the interviewer a little bit more information about the applicant's actual experience with Exchange 2010.
Yeah, it makes it clear what this candidate can offer that perhaps other candidates could not. And the back end of the sentence, we're providing greater control over data storage, and especially the part that says ensuring compliance with SEC regulations, puts a lot of emphasis on the benefit that resulted from this candidate's action. Now, we're going to go ahead and give you a couple of other examples. Go back to the sample job ad very briefly, and we want to talk about the monitor and maintain Active Directory and ensure control of accounts through group policy. It's probably not reasonable to go through every single one of these things and address what they're requiring, but we can be selective about them. So we'll look again at a sentence that might be a little bit flawed, not flawed, but just not quite everything that it could be. We have, I have significant experience with using and maintaining Active Directory in Windows Server 2008. Again, just sort of lists the basic requirements. We also have a curious phrase here.
Significant experience. This phrase is kind of like a pet peeve of mine whenever I see it. Like, what is significant experience? Who defines what is significant? This is not quantifiable at all. It's not descriptive, and it doesn't really add anything to the sentence. Basically, this is just spitting back your resume at this point.
Yeah, and doing so in a way that is unavoidably vague. So let's look at a way that that particular sentence could be improved.
A little bit better.
Wait for it to come up there. I redesigned my company's Active Directory infrastructure to ensure maximum scalability as we grew from a regional to an international company. Again, it connects to what the want ad is specifying, but does so in a way that clarifies this candidate's actual experience and their benefits, what they bring to an organization, and then hopefully what they would be able to bring to another organization in the future. So we're going to move on here and talk now about a concept known as a persona. Persona is one of those tricky things to grasp because it's not something that's inherent within the content. It's something that you sense. Persona is kind of your workplace identity. When you go onto the job, what kind of things do you project about yourself? What kind of things do you try to embody in terms of your professionalism, your attitude, your attitude towards your company as well as to the worker, your coworkers perhaps. In other words, at its core, a persona is going to establish your relationship with the company. Now, since this is kind of a difficult thing to sense occasionally, maybe we'll give you a little bit of a metaphor to hold in the back of your minds. Think of a persona as being like fashion. When you wake up in the morning and you go to your closet, the clothes that you pull out say something about who you are. You wouldn't wear the same thing as, as you see the suit on the right versus the coat I'm sorry, the suit on the left versus the coat on the right, you wouldn't wear these kinds of things to the same place. You wouldn't wear the same sort of clothes to church that you would to go play volleyball with friends. You're not there. Neither outfit is any less you. It's just a question of how you want to present yourself. And a persona in writing is the basically language equivalent of making those kinds of choices. Now, as far as what ad can contribute, it can establish several things. It can identify your social role in the company. It can make your desired first impression. It can talk about the workplace you, and it can demonstrate your culture fit, as you can see. So again, now that we've got the basic concepts here, let's move on. Oh, sorry. You can talk about persona in two ways here. One is the content persona, and the other is tonal persona. Content persona has to do with what you say, and tonal persona is how you say it. Think of one as the actual information, and the other one as simply the impression that you're giving off to people. Let's look at content persona sentences first. Here's a couple of examples for you.
At my last job, I frequently organized charity events for our employees, enhancing the company's community presence. Next, we have, I personally subscribe to multiple industry publications and take initiative to become certified in emerging technologies. And finally, I sought out leadership opportunities, training incoming help desk personnel, and revising outdated manuals and instructions.
The thing that we like about each of these is that in addition to just saying something about what the employee does, they make it clear of saying something about who the employee is. Not every employee would get involved with organizing charity events and working on the company's larger community presence. Similarly, some employees wouldn't take the initiative to keep up to date with current standards and emerging trends. And all of these can communicate some of the more abstract things that job ads sometimes specify. You'll see a lot of job ads that say things like, we're looking for someone who is goal-oriented, motivated, friendly, hard worker, works well with others. Takes initiative. And a lot of all of these vague things that are sometimes hard to quantify. The way you address those things in a cover letter is through examples from your background that demonstrate your persona on a content level. Now, as for the idea of tonal persona,
this is something slightly different from the content. With content, you're picking and choosing what from your past to talk about. With tonal, it's how you say it. So to give you an example, we have the first one here. I appreciate your consideration. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to contact me. Then we have slightly less formal. We have thank you very much for your time. I am eagerly awaiting your call. We also have here, thanks for giving my materials a look. I hope you'll be in touch. And finally, we have, your company represents my dream job, and I will be staying up at night, waiting, clutching my tear-stained pillow tightly until I hear from you again. Thanks for your time.
Now, each of these you can look at as kind of a descending scale of formality. The first one, I appreciate your consideration. If you have any questions, do not hesitate to contact me. Formulaic, polite, but nevertheless effective. Below that, thank you very much for your time. I'm eagerly awaiting your call. Has a little bit more of a familiarity to it. There's a friendliness. Eagerly awaiting your call is very different than please do not hesitate to contact me. One level below that, you have some slang worked in there and a much more conversational tone of giving my materials a look. I hope you'll be in touch. And then finally, a more absurd example, but actually not that outside the realm of what I see in a lot of cover letters.
I've seen sentences like this before.
Yeah, sometimes people aim for enthusiasm and they overshoot and land on desperation. When you see, I will be staying up at night waiting, clutching my tear-stained pillow tightly, a little bit of satire there, but only a slight amplification of what you sometimes see.
Now, as for which of these sentences is appropriate to your situation, it really depends on a variety of factors, some of which we will be touching on momentarily.
Yeah, the main thing that they depend upon is, the identity of the company that you're talking to. Every company is going to have different things that they stand for, different corporate cultures, different workplace environments, and so you want to be able to identify those kinds of traits and frankly just show that you are familiar with them. There's a couple of ways you can show familiarity with a company.
You can research their website, go to their website. You can view like just from the job responsibilities they list inside the want ad itself. That they usually have some kind of summary paragraph that's starting a little blurb about the company itself and the position. You also have subject matter and specifically who you're actually going to be interviewing with if you've been asked to interview or even asked to apply. A lot of times people will seek out candidates and then they ask for these application materials. Yeah, your knowledge of that person that you are talking to can show in your cover letter.
Now, to give you an idea about the value of this kind of familiarity, Train Signal training you're obviously all familiar with because you signed up for this webinar, so it's on your radar in some form at least.
Welcome to our blog.
Now, there's one that the owner and CEO of the company wrote a while back, back in 2007, where he talks about how to get into the yes folder. And these are things that he sees as candidates when he's doing his own hiring that make it past that initial screening and show up in his ones that he wants to call back. He mentioned that in this blog, for the last hire, only 3 people mentioned our website or related to a specific element on our website. All 3 people made the yes folder. Most of the time when candidates apply, in this you can assume 3 people mentioning it out of an applicant pool of several hundred. So less than 1% will actually take the time to research the company that they're applying for and be able to demonstrate some kind of familiarity. And it makes a huge difference. That level of initiative of just taking that action is usually enough in and of itself to, at minimum, get your resume a pretty serious look. As for how you can go and find that familiarity, as Heather alluded to, there's a couple of different ways. You can talk about your company look at the company website itself. Google them and see what comes up. What are they saying about themselves? What are other people saying about them? You can look at employee profiles, and that can be LinkedIn or third-party profiles, or just look at the company website. Oftentimes people will write up just quick profiles of the key employees within the company. How do they present themselves? Look at their press releases whenever they come up with a new product or do something in a community. Look at social media, Twitter, Facebook. You guys know what those are for here. Identify any products or initiative or any YouTube videos. Companies in an age of branding put a lot of effort into trying to associate themselves with things other than just their products. So it's your responsibility as a candidate to figure out what those things are. And if you do this well,
well, you can work to connect your education, your experience, your skills, your job goals to the job that you're applying for. Why this job is the question that you are really trying to answer in the cover letter for your employer. Why are you applying for this position at this company?
Right under the assumption that you're a qualified candidate who's going to have lots of different options available to you, there's probably a reason that you selected this particular job to apply for and maybe didn't apply to others. So you should identify what those things are. And again, it comes back down to that word, connection. Now, the last thing that we want to talk about, do you have anything else to add on that?
No, that's good.
Well, then let's move on.
All right.
We're going to conclude, appropriately enough, by talking about the concluding paragraph.
Now, this is probably the easiest paragraph to write. You can also, this is probably the most template-friendly paragraph. You can typically copy, paste this, because usually what you include in this is, well, when you could potentially start or your interview availability. You are applying for the job. Tell them when you're going to be available next.
This is particularly true for the 5% of you that, were recent college graduates or about to graduate.
Oh, yes.
You can demonstrate, say I'm going to be graduating at this time. Here's where I'm going to be. Yeah, that's where you're going to be finding.
You also, again, kind of closely related to that, the number in times when you may be reached, your cell phone number. Make sure it's a number that, people know you're applying for. Like, very few people have landlines anymore, so it's really not an issue. But, yeah, make sure people in your household know that people might be calling, and what times that are best. You want them to call when you can actually talk.
It's tacky to give your work number for your current job, by the way.
Yeah, don't do that.
And the last thing, simply matter of courtesy, thank them for reviewing your application materials. You'd be surprised how many people leave that off.
Yeah, be considerate and polite. No matter what persona you choose, this is just a simple thing. Just thank them.
Yep. And that's pretty much it. Do that in one page, and you're going to be in good shape. Now, there are a couple of little tech tips that we're going to give you here as we move before we wrap things up.
This is one of my pet peeves, which I know it's kind of changing now, and more people are adopting the resume, the word without the accents. But technically, they mean two different things. If you don't put the accents on, it means resume, which means to begin again, to take up or go with again, etc. Resume, with little accents above it, that is the actual material that you are typically submitting with your cover letter. So I like to tell people that if you are creating a document, a letter in Microsoft Word or Microsoft Outlook, if you're supplying the cover letter like as an email, then you should put the accents on. It's possible. The reason why the accents are usually left off is usually for SEO reasons. Like, if you go to our blog and our website, we want people to find the keyword. They're not searching with the accents above the E. They're searching, just typing the word resume. So that's an SEO thing. But technically, you want to type the E. So in Microsoft Word, and this goes for Word 2007 and Word 2010, you type Control, that little apostrophe, and then type the letter E. And that will type that little accented E for you. Now, if you can't remember that keyboard shortcut, you can use my favorite trick, and that's just to purposely misspell the word in Word or Outlook, R-E-S-M-E, and then you'll have that little red squiggly line up here where you can right-click and then choose the correct spelling from the list of suggested words. That's the fastest way to do it, really. Now, if you didn't get enough here and would like more, this is a book that we love. This is ACE, the IT Resume, Resumes and Cover Letters to Get You Hired. And there is an author website listed here, itcareerace.com. It has a lot of very, very, very useful advice and explanations, and even like little workshop kind of things to really guide you through the process of writing. Which, if you're not comfortable with writing, you're a little nervous about putting things into words. I don't know, we're IT folk, So.
Yeah, this is a good book. I've looked at a lot of different resume guides, and just like with any kind of book, some are good and some are less good. But this is a particularly effective one, I think. And speaking of things that I would like to think of as particularly effective, we also have trainsignal.com/blog/IT career help. Posts regularly about all manner of IT job search, usually on Fridays, and it can be everything from looking for interview tips to resume and cover letter help to information about obtaining certifications and how to actually emphasize them and what to emphasize for particular positions. So come on back soon, and we'd like to see you.
And right now we'd like to open it up to questions. So if you have any questions, use that question box, fill them out. I see we do have a couple right here. So what about job postings where they ask for a cover letter? However, there is not a company name to refer to, such as in Craigslist.
Well, with that, you just have to go with the information you've got. I would refer you to maybe the middle part of this webinar where we talked about looking critically at the job posting itself and making educated assumptions about what you're looking at. But if they don't even go so far as to give you the name of the company, then you just have to kind of go with the information that you've got. In that case, you have to, rather than demonstrating familiarity with the company, really try to show your familiarity with the position you're applying for and the kinds of things you might be asked to do. That's how you can show that homework.
I hope that answers that question. Sort of. All right, next question. We have, the book title is also missing the special characters in the Word resume. Yes, it is.
And that might be, I imagine that's probably a publisher decision.
Yeah.
Maybe for the same search engine optimization.
I believe on the title page of the book, I think it actually uses the accents, which is why I chose to refer to it using the accents. But the cover itself does not do that. Yeah, I noticed that.
Then we have, what is the standard page amount when writing your IT resume? IT resumes, the length really depends upon yourself as a candidate. As a rule, it used to be, no resumes over 1 page ever. That has shifted a little bit, mostly because of the convention of looking at all and listing all of your certifications or expertise in various technologies. That takes up a lot of space, and it's often going to push the resume onto 2 pages. Just because you can have an IT resume of multiple pages, though, doesn't necessarily mean that you should. You have to be able to ask questions about whether a resume goes on for, if you find yourself going on to 4 or 5 pages, really ask whether that's an editing issue more than something that everything needs to be in there.
And this is something that is very much culturally specific. We mentioned earlier advice in this webinar is geared towards someone applying to a job in the U.S. In U.S., in the field of IT, 2 pages is the standard. Longer than that, if you're applying elsewhere, not in the U.S., much longer is acceptable. So that is something that does vary greatly.
Okay. Let's look through some other questions. How about career or specialty changes? No experience in the specific job. If you're changing careers and you don't have experience, there's no real need to hide from that, because they're going to be able to figure that out pretty quickly just by looking at the resume.
Yeah, if they do their homework, that is.
But as far as no experience in a specific job, what you have to do there is highlight the overlap between the job that you have done in the past. Every job that you're going to do, there are going to be certain traits, maybe in terms of project management or technical communication, working with similar technology, even if it's not industry or discipline specific. Those are the kinds of things you might have to latch onto to demonstrate. You really can think of it like a Venn diagram. On one side, you're going to have everything you can think about for the job or the company, and on the other hand, you're going to have your own identity as a candidate. You just look for the areas of overlap, and that should be the emphasis in the cover letter.
And Scott here is asking, technical resume, business resume? Scott, I'm not entirely sure what you're asking. Try asking again, maybe. I don't know.
Let's see.
I assume, are you asking if there's a difference between a technical resume and a business resume? Or, I don't know. Try again. All right, next
I think it was a page mount was the if it's a technical resume, you're going to have a little bit more license to go into, at 2 pages. If it's a business resume, one that maybe puts a little bit less emphasis on the technical aspect of your background, business resumes are going to be briefer than technical ones as a rule. Let's see.
A very general rule.
Some articles I've read mentioned not to use your contact email address from a free service like Gmail, Yahoo, Hotmail. Does that really matter? I don't think so, personally. You want to make sure that you've got a professional sounding resume or email address, something like your name and then at Gmail, Yahoo, whatever. Because it seems to me the alternative would be to have your own personal website. And if you're working with like website design, maybe you would need to do that. But most people, if it's not a free service, they just have their company email, and that I certainly wouldn't recommend using.
Okay.
Something else here. When would you recommend using a functional resume? To answer that question very briefly, you use a functional resume usually in a couple of situations. One is if you're a career changer. That can be a way that you can emphasize what you've done in the past and maybe focus on your strengths while minimizing what might be perceived weaknesses. If you're transitioning from military to civilian job, that can sometimes be a reason for a functional resume, since those are obviously very, very different professional cultures. And I would also recommend a functional resume if you've got a gap in work experience of more than a couple of years. Maybe you took some time off. Like my mom took, I have a twin sister, and she took like 5 years off, from working just between when me and my sister were, and before we started kindergarten.
When they were youngins.
And yeah, and as I think showed up as an answer, we do have information about this on the Train Signal blog. You can just run a search on functional resume, and that'll be right there.
That also is kind of a neat little segue into our IT resume guide that we have. It just got updated, so if you uploaded it like months ago, we've added to it to include a whole wealth of information on both cover letters and resumes. And that is available for download at trainsignal.com/blog. Big banner up at the top. And if you are attending this webinar, if you registered for it, you'll also be getting a follow-up email with a link to that download. So, we also have that webinar we did a few months back on the IT resume. I think it was something like
it was top 10 tips.
Yes, for the IT resumes. That is available from our Train Signal blog as well.
And actually, now that I look at that screen we've got about the blog, right below, under there, it says Top 10 Resume Tips for IT Pros. That is, in fact, the webinar we're referencing right now.
Yeah, January 27th, 2012.
If you want more, go check it out.
Yeah.
I see if a company asks for a CV or a resume, is it necessary to give a cover letter? I think what they're asking there is if they don't specify to send a cover letter, do you have to? I would.
I would, too.
I think you definitely, yeah.
Again, it's we're talking about missed opportunities in like using that just with the resume. The resume is a very, very specific document that is just kind of listing your history and whatnot. So
my general feeling is that you never really know what is going to resonate with a particular employer, so you want to give yourself as many opportunities to make an impression as you can here at the initial stages.
So we also, let's see, here's a good one. Is it a good idea to mention you are looking for a better job opportunity for higher salary?
I don't think you need to mention it in a cover letter.
I wouldn't either. It's something more like that will probably come out in the interview.
Yeah.
So if you're applying for their job, you are definitely looking for a better job, presumably, or a job. For the higher salary, that's on you. Like, do your research. You should be able to figure out what a job typically pays and have like a ballpark range. And you should be able to tell if that's a higher paid position or not. If you get to the point where they are willing to offer you the job, that's where salary talk usually comes up.
And it is somewhat implied. The biggest reason to apply for another job is to try to get an increase in salary. And so that's, I don't know that drawing a focus onto that is going to be a benefit. And finally, suggestions for combating age/wage discrimination in a cover letter. Over 50 with 20 years IT experience. That's a tricky one. I would hope that you would be able to, in a perfect world, I think that any age discrimination gets offset by experience, but there certainly are cases where people are looking to hire younger people because they're cheaper, or maybe there's a perception that there's a different familiarity. First of all, it's illegal for them to do that, to discriminate on those lines. So in a cover letter, I would just not address it. You emphasize your strengths. If people are looking for weaknesses like that, and they're shady people that are going to avoid hiring a candidate that's highly qualified but older, well, not to be indelicate, that's probably not going to be something that those probably aren't people you won't be working for anyway. And yeah, I
back, yes, but good luck proving it.
I've encountered that kind of thing myself at times, so I'm aware of it. So good luck. I would hope that you ultimately land with people that treat you fairly in the way you deserve. Let's see, one or two more questions here before we wrap up the hour. Current job really lacks good management. Is this good to mention in the cover letter or job interview?
No.
Again, probably not. You don't want to badmouth your current employer.
That's just tacky.
And so, yeah, I wouldn't recommend that. Any suggestions for career changers, electrical engineering to network? Again, look for the overlap. And there's information about that specifically. We do have a blog on trainsignaltraining.com that's specifically geared toward career changers. Can't remember the exact title of that one, but, I wrote it. So just you can click on my name through any of the blogs, and there's a list of all of the ones that I've authored. So it's in there somewhere.
Somewhere, yeah.
And I think that's what I see in regard to questions. So what do you think? Want to wrap it up?
Oh, wait, I do want to field this one. Some articles I have read.
Talked about that.
Oh, we did? Oh, never mind.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And I think that's it.
Okay. Any other questions, guys?
All right, well, wrap this up.
Once again, if you want to contact us specifically, if you're watching the recording of this, for example, you can message us through Twitter. We are available. Mine's at Heather Ackmann. That's Ackmann with 2 N's. And
I am at Alan Ackmann.
again, 2 N's.
So we'd love to hear from you. Thanks for taking some time out of your day. And if you haven't done so already, then enjoy your lunch.
And back to you, Chris.
All right, thanks, guys. That's all the time we have for today, folks. Thanks again for attending and for your participation. As a reminder, today's webinar was recorded and will be available to view at trainsignal.com/blog/webinars. We will also email you the link. And remember, as you leave today, please fill out the survey for a chance to win a copy of TrainSignal's Microsoft Word 2010 training. We will email the winner by the end of the week. Thanks again and have a great day.